Hey, what's going on, guys? We're building this table in today's video. So let's watch enough videos like I do where people are making things like these. You'll notice they all have one thing in common, and that is that they use a ton of glue. I use no glue in the making of this. Also, I only use about 5 clamps. I don't use 30 or 40 clamps. 5. No planer, no joiner. All you need is something to cut the wood with, something to sand the wood with, something to screw in the screws. So let's get started, boys. So if you guys are wanting to build a table, you're probably wondering, what is the first step in trying to build a table? First step would be to get your dimensions, figure out what height you want to make the table, what length, what width, and also figure out what type of material you want to use. So I already have a table here. Seems like it's a pretty good height for me. And if you measure it, it shows that it's 30 inches. I had a folding table in my office that I set up, and you can set it up and put some cardboard on it, figure out how big you want to make this table. I want to make a table for 8 people. I know my wife wanted to for 6, but she's gone right now to Florida, so she's just going to have to deal with this
when she gets back.
The internet said that 8 feet is the length you want for 8 people. I thought that was pretty long. That's the length of a sheet of plywood. And this is 7 feet, and you can see, I mean, we got 10 inches between each chair. I feel like this is plenty. So these are the boards that are going to be used for the surface of the table, and I'm just squaring off both sides of the board. That way there's no crevices in between them. They all fit together really nice. You don't have to take much off. About 1/8 of an inch on each side is fine. So now I'm cutting the other side of the boards, getting them all squared up, and you want to find the board that is the least wide out of all those boards and use that one. That way, whenever you cut the rest of your boards, they'll all be the same width. So I'm taking a total of 12 inches off of each one of these boards, so I can take 10 inches off one side if it has knots on it, or if it's bowed, and then 2 inches off the other. So that's what I'm doing right here. And I'm using that square to kind of figure out which ones are bowed. So this line is where I'm cutting these boards at, and I'm still leaving about 1 inch or 2 to play with on each side. That way, whenever the table is all put together, I can put a straight line across the table and just make a clean cut. So now I'm just measuring for the other side of the boards, figuring out where I'm going to cut them at. That car right there is really flying, huh? So the boards I split earlier came to about 5 inches wide. So right here, I'm splitting them, and it'll make boards that are about 2.5 inches wide. and I'll use these boards to form the frame of the table, which will basically be what all the top pieces mount to. So right now, we want to figure out how we want to put the boards together. So as you can see, these are all bottom. So now we want to look on the end grain and see how that one goes this way. Well, the next one you want it to go that way, so they kind of work against each other and they don't warp. If you have them all where they're going like this, then they tend to bow. So we can start over here. We got that over. Yep, we need to take that one out. And this one works. Put it right next to it. Put this one back in place. Over, under, under. So we got to flip one of these around. Let's figure out which one. I mean, that one doesn't look bad. Let's do this one. Flip that one around. Trade out boards. And there we go. Cord wasn't plugged in. So right now I'm cutting the shorter boards on the frame that will be running perpendicular to the tabletop. And I'm trying to make sure I don't have any knots in the wood without wasting too much of the wood. It's kind of hard to do. So now I'm clamping one of those boards I just cut to the bottom side of the table. And since one side of that clamp is on the top side of the table, you want to make sure something is in between that clamp and the table so it doesn't leave imprints on it. This is called a drill depth stop collar, and you can use it to set how deep you drill. I set it to about 1.25 inches. So now this leaves about 1.25 inches of wood that I have to put a screw through, plus the tabletop, which is about 1.5 inches, but I don't want to go all the way through it. So about 3/4 of an inch into the tabletop will be more than enough. So a 2-inch screw would be perfect, and I think that's what I used. Well, we got one side almost finished up. Still got to add those 2 boards to it. This side has a bow to it on that board right there. And I don't have a planer, and I'm not going to go and spend $400 on a planer, something I hardly ever use. So what I did was stick one of those shavings underneath the board over here and over here to kind of elevate them up. So that way, all we have to do is come in with the belt sander and sand off this hump right here, rather than having to sand everything else just to account for this. Well, we got one runner over here, one runner over there. We're going to do one right here, and one right here. So before I put the next board on there, I'm just hammering out some spots that are kind of uneven. I've got it all clamped up, as you can see, on the bottom and top side. I want to make it as flat as possible. And right here, I'm just figuring out where the boards are going to go, just measuring everything. This is a good trick if your clamp doesn't reach. Now I'm measuring for the face board and cutting it. So I didn't want any screws showing, so I cut this little board and mounted it directly to the bottom side of the table and then mounted it to the face board. Some of the boards still had gaps in them, so I put these screws in there at a really severe angle. It came out all right. Then I came up with this method to pull the boards together. I wasn't about to go spend $100 for two 4-foot clamps I'll never use. I finally figured it out, boys. You just gotta get you a C-clamp.
Kaboom!
Works like a charm. Genius. And it did work like a charm. And this was just the other faceboard. So this is where I start drawing out the legs, and I believe my legs were 27 inches tall, so that means they're going to be 27 inches wide because they are going to be completely 90 degrees to one another. That way it makes it to where all the cuts are very easy to make. You don't have to work with complicated angles. Very simple. So these are 2x8s that I'm cutting down to about 7 inches wide, and they're going to mount directly to the legs, and then that's going to mount directly to the table. And I messed up twice here. I cut the wrong angle on one end, but I also cut both the boards too short because I didn't account for the angle that they're going to be sitting at on the table. So I had to go back to Lowe's. Now I'm squaring off the 4x4s. So now I'm setting one of the 4x4s that will be one of the legs on my template that I made, and I'm marking where the marks are going to be for the cuts, and then using my square to make sure it's at a 45. Now that the leg is cut, I can mark where I'm going to notch out that board in the center where they're going to fit together. So now that everything is marked, I can go ahead and draw everything out. Got to go about halfway down on the board, and that's as far as the notch is going to go. Same way on the other leg so they can fit together. And right here I kind of put a crosshatch design where I'm going to cut. That way I don't mess up and cut the wrong side. And then I just set my bump stop on my chop saw at the correct depth and just go to town like you see right here. I didn't even have to use a chisel, just the chop saw, and that was it. So the other leg was basically made the same way as the first one. Then I hammered them together like you're seeing right here. This is the first time I've done legs like this, and it came out really nice. So remember the 2x8s I cut earlier? Well, I mounted them to the legs and then mounted those pieces to the table, which you're seeing right here. And I also added this 4x4 that runs across the table just to stabilize the table from any side-to-side motion. And I mounted it using these 90-degree braces on both sides of it. That worked out pretty well. And I also added these 90-degree pieces right here. This is not a solid X. This is actually 2 pieces. I just thought I would dress up the table a little bit, and I think it adds a little bit more structure to it. And it looks good too, I think. Well, I guess that is it, guys. Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.